critically analyzing global affairs. The Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Oh, well, hello. It's just gone 12 noon in London, 7 a.m. in Philadelphia, and around the world, it's time for the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn. And here on the Muckrakers, we pledge to continue tackling the most controversial and pressing news issues of our time. Our mission is to provide more light and less heat in our unwavering quest to uncover the truth and to inform, educate, and entertain, all with dignity and respect. And it's vital, I always say, that we don't just ask the questions, but question those answers. Well, today, the biggest threat we could possibly have, we're going to discuss the imminent potential collapse of Great Britain as a result of its Ukraine and economic policy. And to help me do that, I'm joined by TNT Titan James Friedman and a returner to the show, Alex KRAINER. How are you both, gentlemen?
Very good. Thank you for having us, and good to be with you again.
It's lovely to be back. Very good. And you're Alex, you're in Croatia at the moment. I was just extolling the virtues of Zadar, which is a stunning place. But as a result of all the tourists flooding in, the economy is a bit more challenging for people, isn't it? Things have got more expensive.
Yes, the country has gotten more expensive, unfortunately. But, I think it's pretty universal these days.
No, that's absolutely right. Well, we're going to focus today on Great Britain, or what used to be Great Britain. Not so great these days. It's no longer the United Kingdom, a bit divided. But let me fill you in, first of all, for Alex, who has been on the show before. He's worked as a market analyst, researcher, trader, and hedge fund manager for over 25 years. He's the creator of iSystem Trend Following, publisher of the daily Trend Compass reports covering over 200 financial and commodity markets, and contributing editor of Zero Hedge. He pointed out in his recent piece, The Imminent Collapse of Great Britain, the hints in the title, that through 2024, Ukraine has been pushed to the edge of the abyss, and it's dragging its Western sponsors there. On the 31st of July 2024, Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree freezing Ukraine's repayment of foreign debts, a de facto default which took effect the next day. The events leading up to this moment and what followed reveals a veritable panic in the leading ranks of the Western financial establishment. Among Western nations, the one that's bet the most aggressively on Ukraine seems to be Great Britain. The consequences will be extreme. Alex, let me start with you then. How did we get here?
I'm not really sure, Andrew. It seems to me that people who are actually in charge are... I don't know another word for it. They're lunatics, and they have been pursuing a number of extraordinarily costly gambles, not just in Ukraine, in the Middle East, the migration, the net zero policies, and all of these projects have multi-billion-dollar price tags, and they're all failing. And they've all put the whole of Britain on the hook for those costs, and we don't even know how much they are. I'll just give you one example. Since in the days since I published my article, Keir Starmer revealed that they found a $22 billion black hole in the British public finances. That same Keir Starmer was haranguing Rishi Sunak back in May of this year in the Parliament, attacking him about the $46 billion pound black hole in British public finances. So which is it? Is it 22 billion, or is it 46 billion, or is it maybe 146 billion? We don't know. But these costs are, and also, we found out that the cost of immigrants to the UK is 8.5 billion pounds a year. Except back in 2016, that estimate was 16.8 billion pounds. So it seems to me that we're being lied to across the board, and every single lie is trying to conceal the actual state of things, which are seemingly much, much worse than what they are being presented to us.
Yeah, you make some valid points. Lies, damn lies and statistics, as Disraeli said. And you're right, the figures are so mind-numbingly enormous that we sort of lose track of what it actually means in practice. James, what's your take on it?
I've got a different view, actually. I don't think, I mean, look, for starters, this whole 22 billion thing wasn't a surprise to Labour. There was no BR report talking about it earlier in the year, which Rachel Reeves had access to. So it's no surprise this amount. But look, 22 billion is not a lot of money for the UK. It's not the kind of money which is going to upset the economy and cause a run on the pound like Labour are trying to pretend. You know, I mean, if you want an example and put it in context, the UK government printed 400 billion 4 years ago to pay for all of the COVID nonsense. So this is small money. I mean, look, I'm no economist. Yes, I know a little bit about economics because I was head of UK trade and also headed up business inflation at the Office for National Statistics. So I know a little bit, but I'm not an expert. But it seems to me that at the moment that the government want to portray the fact that there is a crisis in the UK's finances. I'm not so sure, though, because when you look at all the indicators, so the British pound, for example, is the strongest it's been in many, many years. Inflation has stabilized 2.2% in July. You know, the IMF is predicting that the UK GDP will be one of the highest in the OECD countries this year and next. And, you know, if you look at just in the last week, the demand for gilts, British gilts, is at record high. 110 billion pounds worth of orders were put on bonds that mature in 2040. So I'm not sure. You know, I know that the government is saying that there's a crisis and, you know, the finances and we're going to have to do this and we're going to have to do that. But it all sounds very, very much like 2010 when the Conservatives came in and said we need a decade of austerity. Did we really need that? I'm not sure we did. I think this is setting the pretext so that the government can do what it's planning to do over the next few years with all of these schemes, net zero and the like, and they're just making way for that. I don't believe that actually the UK finances are in crisis.
So some very interesting points. We always say that there's a narrative here, isn't there? And why are people peddling this fear? As I always quote Edward Bernays, it's the easiest human emotion to sell anything, whether it's a particular narrative or a course of action that the government will take, is fear. So you make people scared, you give them these alarming figures, and as a result of which we're going to take away your winter fuel if you're a pensioner, we're going to increase your taxes and so on and so forth. Talk us through, Alex, because you've got a brilliant piece, and I would urge everyone to go and listen to it and to sign up to your brilliant podcast and various news items that you do. Talk about the recent events in Great Britain, which suggests its financial system nearly collapsed. Talk us through that course of events.
Well, okay, so I was very puzzled about Keir Starmer's extraordinarily draconian crackdown on the riots and clashes that ensued after the 29 July or 28 July stabbing of 29th in Southport. Because, you know, none of these things are not exactly unprecedented events. You know, violent crime has been going up. There's been stabbings, there's been, you know, murders, acid attacks. All of this has been in the media before. And also, you know, the people's resentment against uncontrolled immigration is also not anything new. And so I was wondering, why is this happening and why now? And I've been in the financial services industry for 25 years, and so my initial suspicion was something must be very, very wrong in the financial system. And then I started to look at it, and sure enough, I found a lot of smoke, and I assume that there's fire before somewhere there. And I understand what James is saying, and I came across similar information. But one thing that I've learned in the financial services is not to believe any official statistics or financial statements or press releases or government statements at all. Last thing that they're ever going to tell us is the truth. The thing that aroused my suspicion is that, first of all, there has been this group of private bondholders who are on the hook for about $20 million with Ukraine, and who have been very keen for Ukraine to start servicing at least the interest on those bonds. And, they gave them a 2-year grace period, and now for some reason they're desperate to start receiving this money. And so there has been negotiations between them and the Ukrainian government between the 12th July and 19th July. Then on the 18th July, Volodymyr Zelensky flies into London and spends 2 days, second day huddling together with Keir Starmer cabinet. He gets the big honor of giving a speech to the cabinet, which hasn't happened since 1997. Last person who has done this was Bill Clinton in 1997. And they conclude their discussions about these bonds, which is $20 billion, not a very large amount. And now it's on Ukraine's government to restructure their debts, to do a swap with the bondholders with a 37% haircut. So the bondholders were supposed to accept new bonds in lieu of the old bonds. And instead of completing this process as agreed, the Ukrainian government, Volodymyr Zelensky, basically declares unilateral default. Nobody's calling it default, but basically he said, we're freezing all servicing of foreign debt for a period of 2 or 3 months. But, these temporary measures tend to be permanent. And so what has happened on the same day as the Ukrainians announcing their deal with bondholders, which was 22 July, is that the Bank of England announced a conference about a new thinking at the Bank of England for the management of the reserves, right? And that they're switching to something called demand-led management of reserves. Now, what does that mean? That means that if I need money to patch up my reserve requirements with the Bank of England, they're just going to give it to me against whatever collateral I have, which could well turn out to be these Ukraine bonds, which means that somebody who's on the hook there is going to be getting 100 cents on the pound, 100 pence on the pound, for bonds that now are worth less than 50 cents
right
on the dollar. I think last I looked, they were at like 46 cents.
Yeah.
And they're going to probably become worthless. And they announced the new program will be a repo program. Now, for anybody who remembers the repo crisis of 2019, the reason why we had this mushrooming repo program was because some bank in the US financial system was actually broke. And if you let the bank go under, it's going to pull other banks together with it, because they all hold exposure to one another's debts and derivatives and so forth. And in the UK particularly, you have a financial system which is not very robust. It doesn't, you don't have thousands of banks and small financial institutions. Basically, 90% of all deposits are with the big five banks. So if one of them fails, there's a risk that the whole system fails overnight. So the Bank of England is preempting this with the repo program. And what they were saying explicitly is that the bank would have to consider a much broader range of collateral to provide liquidity to the system, which means that any kind of toxic sludge in a crisis will be accepted as money good collateral. So to wrap it up and to translate this into plain English is there's not going to be a bank failure a la Northern Rock or Lehman Brothers. They're going to save the banks by printing money, which means inflation, which will probably be accelerating over the coming years.
Yeah, it is quite extraordinary and exceptionally worrying. I do want to do a deep dive into how we got into this position with Ukraine and then sort of rock star status of Volodymyr Zelensky. But first of all, we're going to take a quick break. Don't touch that dial.